Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today I got the video you all have been waiting for. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Fardriver, at least what I know. Share my tune with you guys. Seems like I got a pretty good tune. This is 72 volt, which going from 48 volt to 72 volt, sorry if it's super windy, it's not much different. Basically, the only difference you're really going to see is the field weakening. Obviously 48 volts does not spin as fast as 72 volts, so you'll have to adjust your field weakening accordingly to RPMs, but I'll show you kind of how to figure that out yourself. I still have to adjust the tune on this a little bit because I'm only getting 45 at the moment, but I really haven't been messing with the field weakening. I've been more or less just trying to get this nice and smooth, get the torque nice, you know, make sure everything's nice and smooth and the motor's not sounding crunchy or nothing. But yeah, so I might just go around and ride with my girlfriend and kind of do like a little voiceover, screenshot some settings and explain everything to you and how I got to the point I'm at right now. But first, let's do some wheelies. This bike is so freaking light. And as soon as I threw 72 volt on it, it was terrifying. Like, it just picks itself up. You guys probably can't see that well on the camera, but this thing absolutely rips. Oh, and it feels good through the dirt. You know, everyone complains that the Mototec suspension's too soft, this and that. It's perfect for trail riding. I'm not trying to build an MX bike with stiff ass suspension, hitting fat jumps, 40, 50 foot doubles. Like, I mean, come on. But you could definitely still hit some jumps. You just gotta be smooth with it. But dang, this thing just pulls. Alright guys, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I'll do some screenshots of all the parameters and give you an explanation of everything, what you can put safely and what you can mess around with yourself to get more speed. Obviously you're gonna have different controllers between the 72-240, the 72-300. For the Mototec motor, I would think the 72-300 is perfect, because I believe those are 100 line amps, 300 phase amps. If you want some more overhead, so you're not running it maxed out all the time, you know, go with like a 72-530. I don't know, they're coming out with new models all the time, so anything you can do, anything you can buy comfortably, if the price is right, you might as well get it, because I'm using a 72. Technically, it's supposed to be a 72-660, but this one is made by SIA Ecosys, and I'm actually, as long as you leave it in mode 3, it runs exactly like a regular Fardriver. But anyways, point is, this thing can do 180 line amps and 660 phase amps, and I'm using 70 line amps and 300 phase amps. Alright guys, let's get to the explanation. Alright guys, so if you have not already set up your controller for your battery and done the auto learn, I will put a link in the top of the video to show the video of the Fardriver wiring kit. You can skip to the end of that video and it'll run you through how to set it up for 48 volts and how to auto learn your motor. For this video, we're just going to show you how to tune. It's not going to be 100%. If anybody has anything to add to it who is experienced with Fardrivers as well, please leave it in the comments for others to see as well. I'd like to think I'm pretty proficient at this, but there's still a lot that I don't know, don't specifically understand, but I can give you an idea of what I understand. So first things first, we want to turn our bikes on, controller on. We're gonna hit COM, we're gonna hit scan, wait for U on, QU FOC, and hit connect. Once it says connected at the top here, we'll go to parameters, and down here at the bottom you'll see expert new BLE. So we're gonna hit that, and that's gonna give you all of your parameters. Alright, so once you've done an auto learn, it'll set you up pretty close to where you want to be. So what I'm going to be doing is going one section at a time. We'll start here at parameters, and I'll kind of go and explain a little bit of what I know each one of them does. So we'll start from the top here, top left, angle detect. So that's going to be your haul angle, and that will set itself up through the auto learn, so we won't be messing with that. Temperature sensor, depending if your motor has a temp sensor or not. My Mototec does not, so we will turn that to none. If it doesn't detect a temperature sensor and you have one of these settings set up, it will beep at you and it will not let it run. So if you don't have one, hit none. If you do have one, try to figure out which one you do have. I like to do trial and error, so I'll just kind of click on one and then go to my graph to make sure the temperature is in the right zone. If it's reading like negative 40 degrees Celsius, or like 200 degrees Celsius, it's probably not the right one, so play around with it what you can. So here we got phase offset. Now phase offset, I'm not exactly sure what it does. When I was doing the auto learn, it had my phase offset at 91. Now I notice when you're taking off, if the motor sounds crunchy and it's just not very smooth, what I like to do is either add or subtract 10 to it. So I started off at 91 and got down to 70, and it started smoothing out really good. The torque was coming in nice and strong. So when you play with your offset, go either up or down by 10 and take off, make sure it sounds nice and smooth, and then once you get it taken off nice and smooth, go ahead and give it more throttle, accelerate through, make sure that offset is nice and smooth. Pull pairs it will recognize through the auto learn, so we don't have to worry about that. Motor direction, I get asked this question a lot. The motor is running backwards, how do I change it? Go to motor direction, and if it's on 1 and it's spinning backwards, put it at 0. Pretty easy. Vice versa. Rated speed is going to show up after the auto learn. Rated voltage, we won't mess with that. Rated power also will show up after auto learn. Max speed, I always just max it out 12,000 RPM. That way it's not holding me back if my motor did go past that. Back speed 400 RPM. That is more of a precaution just in case the phase wires or something short out and it ends up spinning in reverse. It doesn't go wild. So go ahead and set that to 400. It's pretty safe. Max line current I have set at 70 amps. This is going to be the upper limits of what you're going to do for your Mototec motor. You know, about 5,000 watts is where they're happy at. Anything more, they start getting extremely hot and you will pop them very easily. I like to start off at 60 and then bump it up as you will. But like I said, anything after 70, do at your own risk. Alright, so we got max phase current. Again, with the Mototec motors, 240 is probably more than enough. I set mine at 300 amps and it seems pretty happy. It does get very hot if I'm on it and beating on it for a long time. So be wary of that. You know, these are very small motors and you know, it's not a QS motor and it's not going to handle all the phase current. So just be wary of that. If you're on it for a long time, you might want to think about upgrading to a bigger motor. And then we got throttle response. Throttle response, we have Sport, Line, and Eco. Now Sport, if you're doing like drag race and stuff like that, it's very snappy, almost unmanageable for wheelies, which is why I like mine in Line. It's very nice and smooth. Eco I've never tested, but I imagine it's even smoother and it has very slow ramp up. So I recommend putting in Line. And then next we have throttle, accelerate, step. Now the parameters go from 64 to 224 in the manual. 64 meaning when you get on the throttle, it's going to slowly ramp up. It's not going to be very snappy. 224 being the limit is going to be very snappy, very responsive, and that happens to be my favorite. Or you can go to 124, I believe it was, which is right in the middle, which is most people like their throttle acceleration because it keeps it nice and smooth and predictable. For me, doing wheelies, I like 224 because I like that instant snap. And then phase exchange, the only time I've used phase exchange was for my QS165 encoder. So leave phase exchange on no exchange. Eco, Excel, Cofish, I have no idea. So if you know what that is, let me know down below. Weak character, this is going to be your field weakening. So once you get past your motor's peak RPM, and your field weakening kicks in. Now if you have these set up, I'll show you later, but this is just going to be the transition from no weakening to weakening. If you want it fast, slow, or middle. I was messing around doing middle, but usually you can just leave that on fast. Now weak response, we have 1 through 7, 7 being none. Sorry, 0 through 7. Now 0, I believe, is the lowest weakening, and then 6 being the highest. For Mototec smaller motors, MY1020s, I like to leave it on 1. I have seen controllers where it's flip-flopped, 6 being the weakest response and 1 being the highest response. So I like to leave that at 1. Now this one, throttle decel step, I always leave this at 224. So when you're letting off the throttle, if you have it set to 64, when you let off the throttle, it'll still keep going and eventually it'll kind of ramp itself off, which is very, very scary. Do not mess with this doing wheelies. If you have this at 64, you're pulling back too far and you let off the throttle, that throttle is still going to be engaged for a little bit and it will loop you. So 224 I recommend, which is, you know, when you let off the throttle, no power is going to it. And then we got release throttle. I believe this has to do with your regen. how strong you want your regen. And we got throttle low voltage and throttle high voltage. That should auto learn. I've had experiences where you pin it to full throttle and throttle high was at 3.9 and it cut off, so you might need to raise it or lower it. And then throttle low voltage, you can always tell if you're just sitting there and the motor's trying to pull forward a little bit, you might need to raise that up a little bit, but usually auto learn will take care of that. Now we got ratios and speed. So this is all going to depend on your voltage. Voltage is going to correlate to how much RPM you're getting. Specifically Mototec, if you're running a 48 volt, you're probably going to max out about 5,000 RPMs. And 72 volt, you're going to max out probably a little over 7,000 RPMs. Now if you notice, I have it set to 100% all the way up until 6,500 RPM. And after that, I have it slowly decreasing, 89, 67, 45, 30, 19, which is going to slowly ramp in the field weakening. Now 100% means you're getting 100% phase amps. Once I hit 7,000, I'm only getting 89%, which is where the weakening kicks in. It weakens the phase amps and allows your motor to spin faster, getting more RPM, which correlates to more of a top speed. Now the FAIF, I have no idea what those do. I've never messed with them. I don't recommend you do as well. And then this new one that I've been seeing is speed limit. I always just put in 10,000 RPM, so I'm not limited, and it'll change it to some sort of number. That one's kind of goofy. So there's your ratios and speed. Now we have ratios in gear. Now low speed and mid speed is going to be mode 1 and mode 2. So you'll see low speed line ratio is at 100%. I do not use the mode selector on my Mototec, but if you do, this is going to be your line ratio. So 100% means you will get 100% of the amps. So just to make this easy, let's say we're set to 100 line amps, and for mode 1 I only want to do 50 line amps. So 50% of 100 is 50, obviously, so we'll put 50. Now when I go to mode 1, I'll have 50% line amps, which will be 50, and low speed phase ratio. So again, this is for phase. We're gonna have, let's say we're set up to 100 amps phase, we'll set it to 50%, so that will only give us 50 phase amps. Now if you're at 300 or something, you'll have to do the math and figure out, you know, if you want only 200 phase, you'll have to figure out what percentage 200 is of 300 and put it in there. You can also limit your RPM. So if I only want the thing to spin at, 3,000 RPM, which roughly correlates to maybe 20-25 miles an hour, I can go ahead and hit that. So then on mode 1, you only have 50% of your line amps, 50% of your phase amps, and only reach 3,000 RPM, at which the motor will stop spinning. Same thing with mid speed. It's the exact same thing, it's just mode 2. So I like to do mode 1 will be for all my buddies who are getting on, I'll turn it way down. Mid speed I like to do as my normal wheelies, so I'll leave the so we'll do line ratio, I'll put at 80, so that way it drops it down 20%. I usually leave my phase ratio at 100%, so I'm still getting plenty of torque, but the line ratio will mellow that out. And then I usually leave my RPMs as high as I can. Obviously my motor's not spinning past 9,000 RPM, so it'll be fine just sitting right there. So that's going to be your mode 1 and 2. Now we got energy regen. Stop back current and max back current, I usually leave those at 2 amp, 4 amp. If you have a battery capable of receiving more than that, by all means go ahead and turn it up. I don't really mess with regen. I'm not a big fan of the engine brake, since I primarily do wheelies, and I kind of like the two-stroke feel with the free throttle, free engine, whatever you want to call it. But you can put in your battery's rated capacity. In my case, I have 24 amp hour. And then free throttle, this will be if you want 10%, 20% of your energy regen. So it's just different levels of how much regen is going to be applied. And what that will do on free throttle is no matter whatever RPM you're at, it will regen as soon as you let off the throttle. Now you can go even further. As you can see, we got 500 RPM all the way up to 9,000 RPM. So let's say you're sitting at 6,000 RPM, you're going pretty fast, and you want to set this to 80% field weakening. And then, as we go down 55, we'll set it all the way up to maybe 4,000, and it'll all be 80%. And then as you get to the lower speeds, you can start dropping it off 65, 50, whatever you may want as regen, so that way it's not stopping real hard at lower speeds. So let's put that back, since I don't use regen. I'll mess with that stuff later. Alright, so when you do the regen, you'll actually have, so let's go down to functions, and you'll have follow. So follow, I usually disable this, but with follow, you have EABS when brake is valid, which is, I believe, your high brake. So if you hook up a high brake to your regen, you would put that selection, and then you have EABS when release throttle. Now that'll correlate to our free throttle back at the top. So if you have that set up, you're going to want to set follow to EABS when release throttle. Now most of these functions, you can change the pins, like high speed pin and low speed pin. If those are backwards, you can actually switch high speed pin to pin 5 or low speed pin to pin 15. I had to do that on my Mototec. So a couple of nifty things you can do. Boost time, boost release is going to correlate to your boost wire if you have that hooked up. And let's see, most of this stuff you won't mess with. Gear, always in default D, which I believe means when you have your connector disconnected for your 3 speeds, that the middle one, or no connection, will be mode 2. But it looks like you can do default button low, default button high, default button middle. So I should be able to set this to default button high and not have anything connected to my 3-speed connector, and it should run at the highest mode. I'm not too sure, I've never done it myself. Let me know if you do. Alright, so yeah, that's gonna pretty much do it for functions. Display, unless you have a display, you're not really gonna mess with this. I'm not quite too sure what speed pulses all that correlates to with the display and how the controller talks to it. I believe you would have to specifically use your CAN bus line wire or your speed pulse wire. And most of the time we're using CT22s and just running it straight off of a hall signal. So I don't think any of those they'll matter for you. Now if you are, the only thing I do mess with is wheel ratio. So you're gonna have wheel ratio, and then wheel radius, and then gear ratio. So that's your basically your sprocket ratios. So I'm running a 65 tooth in the rear on my Mototec and a 13 in the front, which is roughly 4:1. So I'll go ahead and put 4. Wheel ratio is a 70-12. So that stuff, it's good to set up if you're using your purple wire for the CAN bus or the line signal. And that's pretty much going to do it for display. and then protect. Protect you don't want to mess with unless you're running a 48 volt battery. What you can do is set your low voltage protect to 39 volts. Normally it's going to be set at 62 for 72 volts. That way when your 72 volt battery gets lower than 62 volts, it will shut down the controller to protect from draining too much out of your battery. Now normally your BMS should handle that. Your BMS will kick off before that. So what I do is put low protect at 39 volts. That way I can slap in a 48 volt battery or a 72 volt battery without changing anything other than the battery itself. So that's a good thing to do. Now your low voltage restore, that will automatically change once you press your selection for low voltage protect. And then that's about it for all that. You're not going to want to mess with a lot of this stuff. And then last, we're going to have PID parameters. AN, now if you read the manual, 0 through 8, I believe, is settings for a hub motor, and anything above that is going to be for mid-drive. 16 seems to be the magic number for mid-drive, so I like to leave that there. Now LM, I'm not 100% sure. And the only ones I do know somewhat are the start KI, mid KI, max KI. So we got 4, 6, and 10. Normally they'll be 4, 8, and 12. You can't change the start KP, the KP settings over here unless you have an unlocked controller. I think a lot of people were blowing up their motors or controllers, so they locked those. But what I think this basically does is move around your torque curve. So I put it down at 4, 6, and 10, which means my torque curve is going to be a lot earlier in the run. Or you can stretch it out and do 8 and 12, and that'll kind of stretch out your torque. That's basically all I know. You're gonna have product, which I'm not 100% sure what any of that stuff is, and then you're gonna have fixed parameters, but none of this stuff I've ever changed or needed to change. So that's basically going to be it. Now here is my tune for the Fardriver Mototec combo on my SX500. This will work on your Mototecs as well. This is a very, very high and probably the limit of what your Mototec motor is going to be capable of. You don't want to go too much farther unless you're only doing short burst runs and you just want to keep an eye on your motor. I play around in a lot of soft sand, so my motor gets extremely hot because it's struggling to get through it. Again, these are very small motors. It's not a QS. It's not meant for heavy riding, softer sand, stuff like that. So again, just be careful with what you're doing. Keep an eye on your motor. Don't let it get too hot. You start melting the hall sensors, the magnets. It's not good for it. So go ahead, I will slowly scroll up. If you need to pause the video to see what I'm scrolling through, please do that. If I'm going too fast, this is going to go ahead and conclude the how to tune a Fardriver for your Mototec or Razor. Hope this answered a lot of you guys' questions. I know it looks like there's a lot to it, but there really isn't once you get used to it. Alright guys, if you have any more information to add on to this, please hit the comments, and I appreciate you guys. At this point in the video, we should be done explaining everything. Probably filmed a lot of footage to cover it, but yeah, this is it after a couple hours. I had to take the front fender off because it kept getting caught into the front wheel. I still got to cut it, but yeah, it's running freaking great. All the nuts and bolts are still on there. Chain staying on beautifully. and this thing absolutely rips. My girlfriend loves it. She's about to steal it from me. Not gonna happen. But yeah, guys, we're running 72 volt, like 5300 watts, so 5.3 kilowatts on it, and it's running great. I mean, the motor's gonna get hot naturally. Even when I had the ETM kit, I pushed the heck out of that thing, and you know, it's getting just as hot as it is right now. So I'm thinking my phase amps should not be an issue. It's running great. It's running great. You can cook an egg off the motor, but that's pretty normal. But yeah, guys, I think that's going to do it. Hopefully this video helped you guys out understanding your Fardriver a little bit better, and you too can make your Mototec or Razor. This should pair up with the MY1020 pretty nicely. But hopefully you guys can get yours nice and dialed, smooth, and plenty powerful for these bikes. Alright guys, let me know what you think in the comments. All my newbies, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time, peace.